Hello everyone and welcome to our first podcast on children and young people's rights. My name is Tracy Davis and I'm the Child Health Commissioner for NHS Grampian. I'm here with two of my colleagues.
Hi, I'm Nicola Kenyon and I'm the Strategic Development Officer for GIRFEC in Aberdeenshire.
And hi, I'm Nikki Forsyth. I'm the lead nurse for children and families in Aberdeenshire.
Well, how exciting, ladies, to be here doing our first podcast. As many of you will know, the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, the UNCRC Incorporation Scotland Act, came into effect on the 16th of July. Scotland has the ambition to be the best place in the world to grow up, so that children and young people are loved, safe, valued, respected, and can reach their full potential. The UNCRC Act supports and enables this ambition, and therefore is a real cause for celebration for Scotland's babies, children, young people, and their families. All human rights treaties apply equally to children as they do to adults, but children have the additionality of the UNCRC due to their vulnerability of age. There are 42 substantive rights within the Convention, and they apply to everyone from birth to age 18. They don't need to be earned, they can't be taken away, they're permanent, and they are all of equal importance. The children's policy environment in Scotland has been founded in the UNCRC for many years, so the frameworks and legislation that we are very familiar with in children's services, such as GIRFEC and the Promise, have children's rights at the heart. Children's rights already threads through our integrated children's services plans and NHS Grampian's plan for the future, and excellent examples of rights respecting practice are apparent every day. Now our job is to make sure that we keep doing more and better, and that all of the services and functions beyond children's services feel supported to uphold and further affect children and young people's rights in their day-to-day business too. Nicola, Nikki and I are going to discuss two questions today, and we hope that this will help you to find and access the information or support that you might need to be sure that you are upholding and further affecting children's rights in your work. The first question is, Nicola, for services, what does the UNCRC's Incorporation mean?
Thank you, Tracy. The UNCRC's requirements are at the heart of getting it right for every child, our GIRFEC framework. Certain aspects of the UNCRC are also incorporated into other statutory rights, such as those concerning child protection. So within children's services, we have been working within rights respecting frameworks for a long time. However, the difference that the Act brings is that we're now accountable in law if we act incompatibly with the UNCRC. The UNCRC is implemented in Scotland through two specific legislations, as we just mentioned at the start there, Getting It Right for Every Child GIRFEC, and the Children and Young People Scotland Act 2014. The goal of GIRFEC, Scotland's national approach, is to improve outcomes for children and young people, foster their well-being by ensuring that they receive the appropriate support from the appropriate individuals at the appropriate time. And another piece of legislation, the Promise, makes it clear that Scotland's approach to care needs to ensure that all choices respect children's rights and provide assistance to families when they need it. This gives the workforce and public authorities strong foundations from which to build or improve their approach to children's human rights.
Yeah, Nikki, I think in Aberdeenshire we've made some really good steps forward in this over the years as we keep our focus on children and young people's human rights and all the work that we do through our Children and Young People Services Plan. CRC articles are clearly highlighted throughout the plan and are part of the monitoring and measurement of success. It's key that we don't see this rights-based approach as something that stands alone though. It's threaded throughout all of our work.
Yes, absolutely, Nicola. Upholding and further affecting children and young people's rights is everybody's business. It's applicable to all of us who work within a public body, regardless of our role or whether that role works directly with children or not. We should all be thinking about the services and functions that we provide and how they might impact on children and young people, either directly or indirectly. We need to be paying close attention to how we keep children safe, how we protect them and prevent harm, and very importantly, how we support and enable them to participate in the things that affect them. How do we hear their voice? What do we do with what they tell us?
Well, we've got some fantastic examples of work that's going on around capturing the voice of children and young people across Aberdeenshire and ensuring that we use the voice appropriately and effectively in all our GIRFEC processes to best support the well-being of our youngest population. We use a variety of methods to consult and engage with children and young people and their families to ensure our priorities are the right ones and that our workers are striving to address these in the way that our children and young people would want.
Thanks, Tracy and Nicola. You both mentioned voice and views of the child and young person, which is Article 12 in the Convention. it's important for us to remember there are 4 rights within this convention that are classed as general principles. These are special and underlie all the other rights and are fundamental to the successful protection of children's rights. They are Article 2, which is non-discrimination, Article 3, which are the best interests of the child, Article 6, which is the right to life, survival and development, and as you've both already talked about, Article 12, which is the voice and views of the child.
That's right, Nikki. It's really key for us all to remember that rights are indivisible, so they're all of equal importance. They are universal. They apply to everyone from birth to age 18. They're unconditional. They don't need to be earned. So we often hear with rights comes responsibility, but that doesn't apply here. They are inalienable. They can't be taken away, and they are inherent, which means that they are permanent.
So, Tracy, Nikki, let's talk about GIRFEC. Children's rights is the cornerstone of GIRFEC. It ensures that children and young people work with those who can support them the most effectively. Children and young people need to experience a sense of security, well-being, achievement, nurturing, involvement, respect, accountability and inclusion in their homes, schools and the greater community. These are called the Shinari Wellbeing Indicators, and we can work together to use them to determine who needs support.
NHSG and our partners provide a coordinated multi-agency approach to support all children and young people.
And we've got the GIRFEC Coordination and Support Hub that work alongside our 17 local GIRFEC groups. And this reflects this coordinated and multi-agency approach. Through these groups, we continue to self-evaluate our practice and processes to ensure that children and young people's rights. This approach is at the heart of all our work.
And what about the promise? We mentioned that earlier as well when we were talking about legislation. And the foundations of the promise are built on what care experience people said needs to change in Scotland. Every child should be able to grow up in a family that loves them, and it is vital to the human rights of all children and young people in Scotland. This made very clear in the UN Conventions of the Rights of the Child. And to help ensure that happens, the Convention stipulates that children who have experienced care should have additional protections. But in order to ensure that every child can benefit from this kind of upbringing, Scotland must take action. Children have the right to grow up in a caring, secure and respectful environment, and they should be permitted to stay with their families whenever possible. Families do, however, need support sometimes to make sure this happens. And in addition, a child should be cared for with these rights in mind, even if they're unable to remain with their family.
Yeah, thanks, Nikki and Nicola. What about the other services within our organisations that maybe don't necessarily see themselves as having a role? So it's vital to the compliance of the Act, and more importantly, to the realisation of children's rights for all those carrying out public functions to consider children's rights in their work. All services, not just children's services. This is why children's rights and wellbeing impact assessments are really important and help us to think about the direct and indirect impact a new policy or guideline or practice or pathway may have on children and young people. We have integrated impact assessments within Aberdeenshire Council and our other local authorities across Grampian, as well as within NHS Grampian. There are a small number of screening questions that help us to consider whether we need to do a full children's rights and wellbeing impact assessment or not. It's important to recognise and acknowledge impact on children and young people, even if it is a negative one, because then we can start to think about what mitigation might need to be in place. And if ever there was to be a legal challenge, then our children's rights and wellbeing impact assessment will be key evidence of our decision-making processes. It's just occurred to me that we haven't mentioned our statutory reporting duty yet within the Act, which is to produce a report every 3 years that describes what we've done to uphold and further affect children and young people's rights in the previous 3 years and what we plan to do in the forward-looking 3 years. Our first report under the new Act is due in March 2026, and it must be accompanied by a child-friendly version. These reports will be submitted to the Scottish Ministers before they're published, so there's a high level of scrutiny around this work. Our children's rights and wellbeing impact assessments are able to measure improvement and evidence this within our reports. We also need to be thinking about how we capture and present activity for our reports, demonstrating that we are improving and building on existing good practice. The Children's Rights and Participation Strategic Group have developed a simple Microsoft form to support colleagues to think about children and young people's rights in their work, to highlight examples of good practice and areas of challenge to inform our reporting and future planning. So nobody can capture the work that you're doing better than you can, and we need your contribution to this reporting in order to meet our legal duties. Therefore, we'll be knocking on your door to ask for your input and engagement. It's also an opportunity for colleagues to let us know when they might need a bit of support, which the Children's Rights and Participation Strategic Group is always really happy to offer.
Yeah, you're right, Tracy. It's always great to hear examples of good practice and celebrate the work across Aberdeenshire, isn't it? Well, we now move on to our second question that we wanted to answer today, which is, what resources are available to help staff members incorporate the UNCRC?
Which is a great question, Nicola, because obviously we want to support our workforce with this really exciting and key act. We've spoken about some key pieces of legislation and policies today already, and in Aberdeenshire, our GIRFEC website contains multiple resources and tools to support practitioners to get it right for every child. Our partnership colleagues in Aberdeen City and Moray also have GIRFEC websites that you can access, and the Promise has just published Plan 24 to 30, and is live on a website which lays out what still needs to happen for Scotland to keep the promise. It's built on its 5 foundations: voice, family, care, people and scaffolding. It's a really visual, user-friendly website for anyone wishing to explore it further. And we've mentioned 2 of the strategic plans that are pertinent to our practitioners working in children's services: NHS Grampian's Plan for the Future and Aberdeenshire Children's Service Plan 23 to 26. The Scottish Government have also published guidance on taking a children's human rights approach, which is available for all services to access. A key element for supporting staff to ensure UNCRC is incorporated is listening to children and young people. Their voice, as we've already said, is really vital. And with this in mind, the Children's Parliament website has some great resources, such as e-learning modules and how professionals can make rights real.
Yeah, some really interesting resources there, Nikki. Don't you think that there are so many resources and information available out there to support our rights-based approach that sometimes we can get lost in it all? Children, Young People Rights and Participation Group, chaired by yourself, Tracy, are currently going through these resources and pulling out the key ones for us in Aberdeenshire, and this will soon be available on Aberdeenshire's GIRFEC website. We'll also signpost workers to other resources out there, so we're not in any way limiting use of resources. For me, I really like the Right Way project resources that our MSYPs launched through the Scottish Youth Parliament a couple of years ago. It's hosted on a dedicated hub to support meaningful participation and engagement. The focus here is on what we need to do to change things so that young people's involvement in decision making is on a more even playing field. It makes us stop and think if we have everything in place and how we can do things differently.
You're right, Nicola. We've talked about resources many times in the Children and Young Persons Children's Rights and Participation Strategic Group, and given thought to how we make those as easy as possible for our colleagues to access and to navigate. You're right, there are so many resources out there. Most of them are excellent, but sometimes too much of a good thing can be just as confusing and as unhelpful as none at all. So we've identified some resources that we think are really user-friendly, and we're going to talk about some of them just now. We're currently working on getting all of the recommended resources into one place so that you'll always know where to go to get the most up-to-date information. That place will be the GIRFEC website, as Nicola's just mentioned, and we will promote the link to the specific page as soon as we have it. We also want to include some practice examples from different services and functions so that children and young people's rights can remain relatable to us all. We're also really grateful to colleagues who've been in touch to ask questions for clarity, who are looking for more information, and we thought it would be helpful to produce a frequently asked questions section on the GIRFEC website too. That way you can check if the question has already been asked before taking the time to go and find the answer yourself.
And within our Aberdeenshire GIRFEC guidance, workers are signposted to a really useful resource developed here in Aberdeenshire by the YPOC group. That's the Young People Organisation Campaigning Group. And the resource is called A Guide to Meetings, and it contains guidance on how to make the most out of meetings from our children and young people's perspective. There are some really clear things that we can do with very little effort to improve the experience of everyone involved. It's well worth a read if you haven't already. And don't forget, we've got training resources for staff on the GIRFEC portal through Aldo, and that can be accessed by all services and organisations working with children and young people across Aberdeenshire. And alongside that, there's a dedicated e-learn module on children's rights and participation.
Thank you for that, Nicola. And it's also worth mentioning tourists have some great resources as well. They're all in the one place, and there's some great webinars. There is an e-learning module as well, so I'd encourage you to access that as well. I think it's key to remember that Incorporation is everyone's responsibility, regardless of whether you work in children or adult services. Keep a lookout at the GIRFEC website for information and resources that we've talked about today. And remember that we are a resource too. We are looking to produce a frequently asked question page and host regular podcasts to answer the questions that you may have. If you want to know more about anything that you've heard, then please get in touch with any of the three of us, and we hope you've enjoyed our first podcast.